morning, everybody. It's very unfortunate that I was not able to be with you this morning, but this is something that I've really looked forward to being a part of. But nevertheless, I hope you're going to have fun and you're going to do a lot of learning. And my job is very simple today, just to try and have the tone set for the training that we're going to have for the next 2 days. So my job is simple. I just want to go through words that are usually mistaken for various things, and sometimes can really be very confusing. One of those words is internal controls, and the other one is systems strengthening. And so today I want to attempt to try and bring these two words together so that at the end of the day we can really try and understand where this all comes from. So I don't know if there is anybody who remembers this. Unfortunately, I can't get the answers, but this is technology we had a few years ago, and it's no longer in existence. I don't know if there's anybody who remembers that. I don't know whether a few of you have these gadgets in your homes. I don't know whether there is anybody who anticipated the coming of that. And so the environment we operate in as businesses, as organizations, are very full of uncertainty. Nobody knew COVID would hit the way it hit. Nobody knew the kind of impact that it would have. But it's something that came without nobody actually noticing that it came. So because we are managing organizations and managing projects and managing different things, even families, it's very, very critical that we try and find an approach to how we can manage. So my role today is to try and see how we can explore this whole thing of risk and risk management and what its role is in the attainment of objectives. Like we have said earlier, there's a lot of uncertainty in the environment that we live in, and it has been said that we live in an environment that is termed as VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And because of this, we definitely need to be able to have an approach to management, whatever you're managing, even family. But most importantly for this particular training, our organizations, the organizations that we work for. So how do we deal with this whole thing of uncertainty? Because uncertainty is a fact of life. It will always be there. We don't know what is going to happen tomorrow. But it's very, very, very critical that we actually begin to think through some of the things that could actually happen so that we are a little bit ready for the next thing that is going to happen in the future. So what's uncertainty? So organizations of all types and sizes face internal and external factors and influences that make it uncertain whether and when they will achieve their objectives. There are things out there that will come in the way of you achieving your objectives. And these could be internal factors, but they could also be external factors. So the effect that this uncertainty that we're talking about has on an organization's objective is what we call risk. And this risk is at all levels of the organization. It can be at the strategic level, but it can also be at the tactical level and the operational level. So it's at all levels of the organization. So there's uncertainty at every single point. And so it is critical that we deal with this uncertainty as we try to manage and achieve our objectives. I have a photo that I like very, very much. And I don't know what you think is happening in that particular photo. And it would be nice to have a discussion around what could actually happen. This gentleman has objectives. They want to be able to move from one side of that string to the end. But there are a number of things that may not allow them to be able to actually do this. They could fall inside. Those things could jump up a little more. If the wind came, there are many things that could happen actually for them to be able to get there. Right? There's another one that I like. If you carefully read what's on that slide, it says, "I knew I shouldn't have brought the termites." For those of you who are familiar with the story of Noah in the Bible, you remember that he had to take on everything. But and at this point, this guy is arguing that the termites could have actually caused a really huge problem because they were feasting on the wood, and before they knew it, they were unable to get to where they were. Of course, for Noah, we were able to finish whatever was set. But for this particular boat, it was not able to finish the journey because of the termites that had been carried. So like I said, organizations have objectives. They want to achieve something. And those things are set for the short term. Their objectives are set for the medium term, but they're also set for the long term. But like I said, there are things in there that will not allow the organization to be able to achieve its objectives. And that is what we call risks. There are risks, there are uncertainties that will not allow the organization to be able to actually attain those objectives. So what do? What we do is that we come up with controls that will deal with the risks to be able to attain those particular objectives. So we have a relationship. We have objectives that we want to attain, that we want to achieve as organizations, but there are risks. There are certain things that are not going to allow you to be able to attain those objectives. So what do? We need to come up with controls. We need to come up with things that will help us to be able to deal with the risks so that we are able to actually attain our objectives. And like I said, this is at the minutest level, even at individual level. The example that I usually give is that if you have the objective of waking up, for example, at a time that you don't usually wake up at, for instance, you have a plane to catch and it's at 3, but you usually wake up at 5, and there's a risk that you might oversleep. It is very critical that you come up with a control of ensuring that you wake up in time. And one of the things that we do is to actually set our alarms. So you can see your objective is to wake up early at a time that you don't usually wake up, which is at 3. And the risk is that you might oversleep. And the control is that you're setting up an alarm that will actually wake you up. And so even for organizations, there are certain things that you want to achieve, but things like COVID might come in the way. So you have to come up with controls that will help you to be able to take care of those risks. Now, the treatment for risk generally has four alternatives, or there are 4 options that you can have as far as risk is concerned. You can avoid the risk. You can accept the risk. You can reduce the risk. You can transfer the risk. And different risks will require different treatments depending on what the organization can afford to take on. If, for instance, a risk is too high, an organization may decide to avoid it and not do that particular activity. If, for instance, the risk is one that can be transferred, for instance, insurance, you can find that because one of the objectives is to ensure that your staff are up and running and healthy and they are able to deliver, one of the things that you require is that you need to be able to take care of their health needs. You could take care of their health needs when they fall sick and you treat them, or you could actually buy insurance. And when you buy insurance, what you're basically doing is that you're transferring that risk to another organization, so that when your employees get sick, then it's now very easy for you to tell them, go to this particular facility because we actually have insurance. So like I said, in terms of treating the risks, you have 4 options. Generally, you could avoid the risk, you could accept the risk, you could reduce the risk, you could transfer the risk. We will not get into the details of all these particular areas, but these are the things that will help you to be able to deal with your risks so that you're able to attain your objectives as an organization. Now, there are 4 key operational and strategic parameters upon which we build systems. But just to take you back a little bit, so we've been talking about controls. And so in normal language, usually we say you need to have internal controls. Now, when we talk about internal controls, it is really the same thing as systems. That is why, for instance, in an organization that will fail, somebody will say, oh, they have failed because they don't have good systems, right? The other word you can say is that they have failed because they don't have good internal controls. They don't have in place checks and balances, things that will help them to take care of their risks so that they are able to actually attain their objectives. And these controls can be policy controls, they could be physical controls. Policy controls meaning that, for instance, you need to have a policy on, for instance, people coming on time, because you know that if there's a risk that people will get to work late, and you know it is going to affect your deliverables. So you make sure that you set a policy within the organization to say, because there's a risk that people will come late, I need to be able to put a policy that guides people on how we manage time within the organization. But there are also physical controls. For instance, we have cameras all over the place. These cameras help us to be able to know, to be able to capture certain information that can help us in the event that, for example, there's theft. All those are controls. So you can have policy controls, you can have physical controls, you can have all kinds of controls. The 4 key operational parameters or strategic parameters upon which systems are built are people, processes, technology or tools, and then organizational culture. To be able to build those controls, management has to sit down and be able to clearly think through what kind of controls that they need to actually put into the organization. It is not something that is going to happen by chance. There's got to be a deliberate action by management or those who are actually managing to actually put these controls in place and keep track of them so that they know which controls we actually have for different areas in the organizations. So I want to emphasize the fact that they don't come by chance. You have to deliberately go out and actually come up with these controls. So I said that the first parameter is people. So you've got to create a system around people. First of all, you have to have the right people in the right positions, doing the right things. It's very critical. So you've got to think about your organizational structure. Do I have the right people? But most importantly, are they doing the right things? Are they in the right positions? You have to ask yourselves those questions. It is not something that will just happen. Right? So we have a system for people. But you also need to build a system around your processes in general. Do we have different policies that are required for us to be able to actually run the organization well? The same thing. You need to sit down, take a stock of what policies do we actually have in the organization. Do we have a policy on asset management, for instance? Is it comprehensive? Does it deal with all the risks that we can actually envisage? Right? It's really very critical that you sit down and say, as far as the system for building policies, processes, and procedures is concerned, where are we as an organization for the different areas? When I have a finance manual, is that enough? When I have a human resource manual, is that enough? Does that sum up all my operations? And are those the only policies and processes that I need? So it is very critical we take a stock of what processes do I need to have to deal with the kind of risks that I deal with as an organization. One of the policies that are really now very critical that have been emphasized during this time of COVID is the business continuity policy. Do we have business continuity policies or strategies or plans in the event that we have a major disruption? What do we do? Shall we say, for instance, if people are unable to report to work, it is critical that we will meet at 8 at the office, probably because there is no communication for you to be able to tell people. So you have things that you will do, and every staff knows what will happen if something happens that does not allow, for instance, communication to happen because of a major disaster or an interruption. So it is very critical for you to take stock of what policies and processes do you have in place to be able to actually attain your objectives. The other system that we need to think through is technology. What technology do I have in place that makes work a little bit easier? Am I still using manual systems? Am I using tools that do not help me to be able to meet the expectations of stakeholders, for instance? If my stakeholders expect a very quick service, do I have the right technology and tools that will ensure that I actually meet that expectation? So I need to create a system around technology and take a stock of what kind of technologies and tools do I have in place to ensure that I can actually achieve the objectives. Now, the last parameter, which is really, really very critical, is organizational culture. So Peter Drucker said organizational culture is strategy for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. What this means that however good your other parameters are, you have a very good people system, you have a very good processes and policies system, you have a very good system in terms of technology, as long as your organizational culture is bad, you will not be able to achieve your strategy. So it is very critical to see what kind of organizational culture do we have in the organization. And of course, usually organizations attempt to do this through coming up with values, transparency, professionalism, team building, teamwork. All these are values that organization wants to try and ensure that they have to be able to achieve those objectives. Now, one of the biggest mistakes that we do in organizations is thinking that culture will come up anyway just because we've actually set those particular values. It takes initiative, real initiative, to actually be able to put up culture that will help you as an organization. So you have to have culture initiatives. The auditors have started what they call culture audits to try and see how is your culture. Do people keep time? When they say, for instance, we will come at this time, the meeting will begin at this time. Does it begin at that time? Is that the culture in the organization? When the MD says everybody should be in this place at this time, are people there in that time? Are they professional? When an email is written, do people respond to the email? Or emails go unanswered for days? What kind of culture do you want to have? Most importantly, what are the steps that you have taken to actually be able to get the culture that you actually need? So there have to be deliberate culture initiatives. And review your culture deliberately. The word is deliberately. How do you review your culture to make sure that it is not the one that is actually not allowing you to be able to attain the objectives that you've set for yourself? So those are the 4 operational parameters upon which systems are built in general. People, do you have the right people in the right places doing the right things? Do you have the processes and policies and procedures that you need to be able to mitigate the various risks within your organization? Do you have the right technology and tools? But most importantly, what kind of culture do you have? Now, you might be saying that now this is a lot. How am I going to do this? Luckily or fortunately, we have guidance. We have guidance to set up the system, to set up internal controls. There are quite a number. One of the most common internal control frameworks is what is referred to as COSO. So it's the most common framework. And we use it as organizations, and it's something that you can buy and follow so that it can guide you. But for purposes of this training, things like ISO 55000 is an asset management standard that can actually help you to set systems in the asset management space. And it's not one. So the ISO 55000 gives you an overview and the principles and the terminology that will guide you. But there's ISO 55001, which is basically an implementation guide, right? And then you have ISO 55002, which is also another standard, which is basically supposed to guide you on the application of ISO 55001. So these are available to help you to be able to manage your risks so that you are able to have a framework within which you are managing your risk to be able to attain your objectives. These are not the only this is not the only guidance that is available. There is ISO 31000, which deals with risk management. There is the people in the banking sector have Basel. There is COBIT for the guys in the technology space when you're trying to develop systems relating to IT. There is COCO. There are quite a number of internal control frameworks that can actually help you to be able to design a system. So I'm sure you've heard about the 5 capitals, and we won't dwell into what the 5 capitals are. But one of the most critical 5 capitals is physical capital. And this training is about trying to see how do we help you to be able to manage, to be able to have controls that will help you to manage your physical assets well, your physical capital. Because if you don't manage your physical capital well, guess what? You're not going to be able to deliver. You're not going to be able to meet the expectations of your stakeholders. So it is critical that you take care of physical asset management. And my hope is that over the next few days, you will be able to get a few tips from the team that will help you to be able to know how to manage your assets. Now, remember, it's not just about complying. It's not about having just that fixed asset register. As you will be told during the training, it is being able to extract value from that asset. And so the risk we have is, what risks do I have? Not only to keep an updated risk register, but what risks do I face that will not enable me to extract all the value that we have in that particular asset, in that one asset. So it is not just about compliance, you'll be told it's also about performance. And so I wish you all the best during this training, and I pray that you will be able to get one or two things that you can go back and apply in your organizations. And thank you for listening, and I wish you a very successful training.